Hi, I'm Shayana Kadidal. I'm a senior managing attorney at the Center for Constitutional Rights. I'm working in our Guantánamo project. I just returned from a week down at Guantánamo where I visited with Sufyian Barhoumi, who is one of our clients probably for about the last 7 years. He's a 43-year-old Algerian man, and one of the unique things about his case, I guess, is that he was cleared for release under the Obama administration, cleared by a periodic review board, which is essentially kind of a panel made up of representatives of all the major intelligence agencies, the CIA, the FBI, the Defense Department, the State Department, the Justice Department. Every agency with a stake in Guantánamo has to unanimously agree that someone can be safely released in order for them to be cleared. Barhoumi was cleared by a PRB, and yet he was stranded at Guantánamo at the end of the Obama administration. He was one of 5 cleared men who, for a variety of reasons, the administration was unable to transfer before President Trump took office. Now, we were as shocked by this as anybody, and we filed an emergency motion the last week of the Obama administration to try to get the courts to force Obama to send him home to Algeria, which is the only place he's ever wanted to go. You know, this is not a case of someone who's trying to find a third country to do him a favor by taking him in as a refugee. He just wants to go home to Algeria, to his brothers, and to his mother, and be with his family again. But in the course of fighting in court about that emergency order for release, we learned from the government that basically the reasons that he wasn't transferred to Algeria had really nothing to do with him, but were basically all about essentially an inability to agree on the terms and conditions of his transfer with the Algerian government. Again, something completely surprising because 15 Guantánamo detainees have been transferred to Algeria over the years, and there's never been any incident of anything going wrong with those transfers. So, you know, we were surprised. Barhoumi himself was also surprised. You know, he's a very sunny person, always upbeat when we meet with him. And, you know, one of the interesting things about meeting with him, you know, both last week and the week after the inauguration, when I first saw him post-Obama, is that he had given away almost all of his possessions. You know, he first started giving things away to people who were leaving so that each one of them would have one item from him to remember him by. You know, not surprising given that these men have spent 14, 15 years together down in the prison in Guantánamo. And then he started giving things away to men he thought were going to be left behind when he left. So all the little items that they let us submit, you know, prayer caps, books, watches, all these things he had given away. You know, one of the things that's sort of striking about the prison camps now is how empty they are. You know, one of Barhoumi's big passions is soccer, right? If anyone's ever been to some place where an Algerian national team game is showing, you won't be surprised that an Algerian loves soccer. And he always used to describe himself to us as the best striker at Guantánamo. But what he told us now was that since about 40 men had been transferred in the last 6+ months under the Obama administration, they no longer had enough men left in each cell block to be able to get a game going. He's in the most crowded cell block with maybe 8 or 9 men in it. Some of the cell blocks have only 3 men, and the authorities there, as of yet, won't let them all out into recreation at the same time. It's block by block. So he no longer has enough people to get a good 5-on-5 game going. This and everything else is very tough on him. He's a very, very social person. You know, one of the things I think that really had a big impact on his periodic review board was that he had a letter from a former guard, someone who remembered him from years earlier, 2002, 3, and 4, when this person was a guard at Guantánamo, and said he was easily the most relatable man among the prisoners, someone he remembered a decade later, and was someone who was always trying to defuse situations between guards and prisoners, always trying to be there to kind of resolve things peacefully in what was a very, very difficult time back in the first couple of years of Guantánamo. You know, this is the first time anybody before PRB board had a recommendation letter advocating for his release from a former guard. So that's kind of Barhoumi in a nutshell. Really, somebody incredibly social, incredibly upbeat, very outgoing, and who speaks several languages, which I think helped. He's got his native Arabic, a decent amount of English, good enough that we can do meetings with him in English, and then of course a little French and some Spanish too. The reason he knows so many languages is that he lived all over Europe. He left Algeria right as the horrible civil war they had in the late 90s was kind of cresting, or really starting to peak, I guess, 1994 or so. And so he lived in Barcelona for a while, then in Paris, and then eventually in London for a couple of years as sort of a street merchant selling clothing and things like that. Learned how to banter with people in a whole bunch of different languages. Notwithstanding that, his only ambition right now is to get back to Algeria and get back to his mother, who's pretty elderly, as you can imagine at this point. And he really wants to spend her last years together with her in Algiers, where the family lives. They're relatively well off. His father was a lawyer who had roots in the Algerian independence movement. So the family can certainly take care of him and get him back on his feet, again, Algeria is one of the least problematic places for our government to transfer somebody to. They've never had a significant problem with any of the other 15 men who've gone back. So bottom line, basically, it's his situation is a question about the Defense Department and the State Department in the United States getting their acts together and figuring out what their Guantánamo policy is, and then trying to make releases happen for the people who are cleared, where there are no problems whatsoever presented by the countries they would be sent to. Barhoumi being the prime example. And maybe to a lesser extent for the Algerian government to feel like it can press hard a little bit against a new administration where nobody really knows where they stand on a whole bunch of issues, right? I think the chaos and uncertainty around the Trump State Department, around Trump's foreign policy, may make other governments a little bit reluctant to make demands just yet. But we hope that the Algerian government will be appropriately forceful with their State Department and Defense Department counterparts over here in demanding Barhoumi's return. We'll have a whole bunch of suggested ways that people working with Witness Against Torture can help, but I just want to wrap this video up by saying thank you to Witness Against Torture and thank you to everybody who's helped keep Guantánamo in the public consciousness.